его перебить. Придержи свою гордость и прыть, уважай его возраст седой. У адыгов обычай такой. Знай, мой друг дорогой, у адыгов обычай такой. Мисараш, мисараш, да адыгам дихаб зарараш. Если гость постучит у двери, гостю сердце свое отвори.
مساء الخير أخواتي إخواني من أبناء الشعب القفقاسي. اعذروني، أنا عمري ما قدمت برنامج، فبدكم تتحملوني لأنه ما بعرف. لكن اليوم إحنا بنستضيف السيدة سارة سلاي، وهي مختصة أمريكية في شؤون القفقاز، حاصلة على درجة الماجستير من جامعة كامبريدج بالتاريخ الروسي، مختصة في فترة الحرب الأهلية، وحاصلة على درجة ماجستير ثانية في تاريخ القوقاز في فكرة القوقاز الموحد أثناء الحرب القوقازية الروسية. وهي مبتعثة الدكتوراه أيضا من جامعة كامبريدج لدراسة تاريخ القوقاز. وهي سياسية نشطة، تدرس الأحوال في القوقاز وتدرس الأيديولوجيات تبعت الشعوب القوقازية. هذا هو تعريف على السيدة سارة، راح تنضم لنا بأي وقت هلا. هاي الحلقة احنا عملناها معها مشان نتناقش مع بعض عن وضع القضية القوقازية عموما، والقضية الشركسية خصوصا في ظل الأزمة الأوكرانية. Hello, Mrs. Sarah, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
I was just talking about you, telling people about you before we start. Sorry, I have to mute this. Oh my God. I'm really bad in technology, so be easy on me, okay?
Okay.
And this is my first time I do this kind of stuff, so I need a little time to, to prepare my mind and thoughts before I tell you about it. Mrs. Sarah, can you tell me a little bit about you, please, and what you do in Caucasus, as studies?
Well, I first started to research the Russian war against Chechnya after the Soviet collapse for my first master's degree. And when I went to Ingushetia, I saw what happened in Beslan after it, and I listened to people talking. And I became more interested in the ties of, so my first master's was Russian studies and East European studies, but I studied the war in Chechnya. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I became more interested in the Caucasus as a whole region. And I realized this is a place very different from Russia. It had very ancient ties to the Near East. And so I wanted to look at it from that perspective. And so I did a second master's degree with Near Eastern studies. And I studied the Caucasian emigration in Europe in the interwar period. So after the Russian Revolution, before World War II, the idea of a united Caucasus in the emigration. But then when I was analyzing these stories that people were telling, the arguments they were making, they were blaming each other for things in the emigre period, I wanted to find out what really happened during the revolution and the Civil War. So I came to do a dissertation on a regional history of the Caucasus during the Russian Revolution and Civil War period. So I have some background in Russian studies. I have some background in Near Eastern studies, but I've always focused mainly on the Caucasus. I don't know why, but it's interesting.
Yeah, we are very interesting people, by the way.
Yeah, there's endless puzzles to solve, so fascinating.
Well, my lady, I just want to ask you like a couple of questions. As what you see in the region these days, we have this Ukrainian thing that starts happening. It's on the surface now. It's the, how can I say, the red news in the world. So according to someone who studied the history of how things were going in Caucasus, and of course you have your own point of view of the things that going around now, and you know the Circassian movement too, you have an idea about it. So what do you think, as Sarah Sláy, Circassians have to do to highlight their cause and to make their voice reach to the highest level of politicians in Europe and the Western world, and let's say in the world, but especially there, to have the support for their cause in the international fields?
Okay, so there seem to be a couple questions in there, right?
It's about 3 questions there.
So, first of all, well, I was brainstorming today. I was trying to think of all kinds of ideas in a short period. And I've been learning new information to think about what do we do now? What's happening now in general for everyone in the world? And so my thoughts might be not quite so organized, but I'll try to kind of start organizing them now as we speak.
I'm writing with you, like, just go ahead.
First of all, in 2004 or 2005, I was in Russia, and the Chechens were saying, human rights organizations, Russian dissidents, Chechen activists, they were all saying, if we don't do something now, this is going to get worse. And Putin is, and then you study the region, you talk to people. The Kremlin does certain things, and things keep getting repeated, and you start to see a pattern. But you also see a pattern of Russian or Kremlin, let's say, expansionism. It's a pattern that reflects historical patterns. It's a pattern that happens even in the post-Soviet time over and over. And you have a pattern of the Western powers not doing anything much about it, or planning to do something and then not doing something, or never really promising anything and never really doing anything. So I call this the policy of appeasement has emboldened Putin. And so now we have this today. And I think it was completely foreseeable. People were screaming about it for a long time, but those voices were not heard. They were ignored. They were gaslit. And maybe some people had other interests. It was more convenient to cooperate with Russia for various reasons. They kept hoping Putin will do the right thing or something. So this is where we've gotten to, and I don't see how it can possibly be a surprise to anyone if they've been paying attention. A lot of people have been receiving different messages from the Kremlin propaganda machine, and they're really happy about this. And so there's a lot of people like that in the world. So I don't know what I can say. It was obvious and no one did anything.
Yeah. So my question is, like, do you think this policy of Kremlin, especially Putin, is going over and over again? Like, first time it was in Chechnya, second time it was in Georgia. He did the same thing. Like, I want to protect the Russian citizens that I have there, that he gave them the passports, the citizenships, and he found an excuse to attack these countries as a protection for his people there. Then he goes out and leave like 2 or 3 places there belongs to him. It happened in Chechnya, happened in Georgia. Now it's happening again in Ukraine. It will be in Moldova very soon too. And nobody's doing anything about it. How do you think this can affect Circassians if they did any movement, this kind of politics, like this thing?
Well, I don't, it's not always exactly about protecting Russian citizens. There's different reasons that they'll go and set up a puppet regime or, bomb thousands of civilians to death. But the idea is expanding territorial, strategic territorial areas, expanding their influence, pushing people out, keeping, what does he want to do that for? I don't know, but they consistently keep taking more and more pieces of territory, like attrition from their neighbors.
Yeah.
And undermining the stories, the narratives of the neighbors. So they have their narrative and they're pushing this narrative out, and that's preparing the groundwork for them to annex more and more territory. And so we don't know, I don't know personally why this or that piece of territory might be strategically important for Russia, but we could sit and analyze that and probably come up with answers pretty quickly, if not the second. But you see them expanding their military presence further and further. So the more little bits of territory you get, the more land you get that you can use for various purposes. The more you push your influence out, the more people listen to you, things like that. So to me, I see a generally aggressive expansionist power. What their main ultimate purpose is, to me, it seems just to be like pride and glory. I don't really see any true purpose to it.
So but it's just an ambition for Putin, not more than that.
Well, actually, there's the historical narratives, that the stories they tell themselves about themselves, and so for some, there's all these moments of hurt pride, like the collapse of the Soviet Union and so on. So maybe they're trying to fulfill some historical destiny. Maybe they're just telling people that, and they're making money in some way. I don't know what the reasons are, but what we can see is that they keep taking more and more territory, and the neighboring nations and peoples continue to be punished, to be destroyed, to be attacked, to be violated. Their rights are violated. They're genocided or partially so. So we could say there's genocidal attacks on peoples and nations. So I was thinking about this narrative of, so actually, how do I frame this? A lot of what Putin got away with has been because of the narrative that the Russians are presenting. Like they're presenting like they're victims of NATO expansion, the collapse of the Soviet, what I hear people telling me around me, like, this is good, Putin should go there. I don't want to see a Ukrainian flag. The West destroyed the Soviet Union, and so Putin is saving us, or I don't know what kind of nonsense they're talking about, right? But this story is being echoed in the West on the far left and on the far right, and among other conspiracy theorists and stuff like that. It has gained a lot of traction around the world. I have people calling me, telling me, texting me all the time with this great information, and it's really frustrating to hear it. When I think about this, the Russian narrative has gained a lot of traction, even though it's a lot of lies. They're clearly the aggressor. There's so much victim blaming. There's so many lies, and even if that's the case, that narrative goes far enough that they get some traction and they can do what they want, and then the cycle starts over. Mm-hmm. So I started thinking about this kind of counter narrative, which is or different kind of oppositional narrative, or countervailing, I guess, narrative. It's to me the truth, closer to the truth, which is that Russia has continually attacked different smaller nations, and the lack of any response from the West has just emboldened him to keep doing this. And now he's going to try to expand his presence into the Middle East and Africa more and more. And so I was thinking about that narrative. Merab Chua said this on his Facebook. He posted basically the same thing, almost the same argument. I've been saying it to people basically informally. I kind of looked this up on the internet. I found one article. Someone wrote about it. Let's see, what was her name? There's, she has a well-known name, but I don't know where I wrote her name. Anyway, she wrote basically a very similar, she wrote an article. Tracy German published an article recently, which was, she said basically the same thing. It starts with each of these wars, they learn how to improve their military, but they also learn what the Western response will be. And every time the Western response is kind of nothing or sanctions, and then they practice how to respond to that. And they also see Western hypocrisy, and they're able to leverage that to support their narrative further. But anyway, so she mentions Chechnya, Georgia, Crimea. She mentions everything. And I was, well, she didn't mention the Circassians. So I'm thinking many people around the periphery of Russia, and especially closer to home, in the Caucasus specifically, they've had very similar experiences with Russian aggression. And there's this sort of, let's, for lack of a better word, this counter narrative or this alternative better narrative needs to be strengthened and promoted, but the Circassians could put themselves into it so they can promote this narrative and then put themselves into it. So if violence has been committed against Ukrainians and this and that, but also us, and they can bring that forward in this way. So that's one idea I had. And how does the Circassian situation fit in the current situation? People now suddenly maybe barely started to see a pattern. And you can say, you can reinforce the pattern. So you're helping combat Russian disinformation generally. You're joining the bigger story. You're reinforcing that pattern. But now you're saying, well, you see what's happened to Ukraine. This happened to us 150 years ago or whenever. You see how they've been heroically fighting. Well, we've been heroically fighting. But you don't want to just say, look, Ukrainians and us, but you could, because it's not so polite, but under the circumstances. But
it's different, but it's the same. Like, this is how what
people are aware of in this moment, and show that it's a very broad pattern.
Yeah, you can say like it's different, but it have, I think, the same guideline. Like it's different, but it's the same. Like us, Ukraine, Georgia, everybody.
Of course, every group has its specific.
Exactly.
But the fact is that many people don't care about Ukraine because they believe the Russian story, or it's not in their interest. More people care about Ukraine now than they did about Chechnya. But more people care about Ukraine now than they did Georgia, what happened in Georgia. But nobody even knows what happened to Circassians. So bring it together is a suggestion. I have other ideas, but that was one idea related to your question.
I understand. I have a question here from Mr. Bashmoqa. He's saying some thinks that Putin knew how to get out from the new thought of the modern war that Western world made. And this thought that he's talking about is like, when we have a war, we have to make it away from our land. But Putin did a different thing, that he's doing it in his old land. And he can take in few days what the Western cannot take in years. What do you think about this thought he's saying, Mrs. Sarah?
I've only recently started studying Russian military doctrine, so I don't know I've only started to look at it because I wanted to start to think of counter propaganda possibilities, really. So I don't know a whole lot, but I do know they have been thinking about the changing nature or the changing character of warfare, and they've been adapting, and they've got an idea that information war they're still discussing it, but is information war or disinformation war actually war or not? But they started to see it as basically part of war in practice, if not in perfect theory. Because so generally war is defined as the use of force, and it's to gain a political results using force when everything else failed. So they're rethinking the meaning of war, and that's why they've been using disinformation and propaganda type campaigns to prepare the way for because they already felt like they were in war with the West. In their imaginations, they've been at war with the West for a long time, more or less, and that's why they're justified in spreading all this propaganda and disinformation. Now, to what extent, and I also know that they were planning they know they cannot handle a sustained conflict with a peer rival, with a NATO or a United States. So they try to take as much as possible quickly, so it's a surprise attack, and then no one can react. And they've also authorized the possibility of using nuclear weapons, if someone makes an existential threat to their territory. But what is their territory? Is that is that Abkhazia? Is that Kiev now? So what is an existential threat to the Russian state? If you help a guerrilla resistance movement in a periphery area, is that an existential that they're freedom fighters? Is that existential threat to Russian state? I don't know what they're defining as existential threat. So they have challenged the Western way of war, and I think they've been outwitting us a lot.
But they succeeded anyway, this challenge.
They succeeded. They're doing... I hope that Ukraine will be as embarrassing to Putin as Chechnya was to Yeltsin, but let's see. But if we think about it, more back to the question, was he taking back territory that was his own? Well, that's in his head.
Well, this is what he believes in. This is what he's talking about.
But he is not... I agree with Facebook user. Russia's government acting is affecting all small nations. Those small nations should work together for their freedoms. This is exactly my idea. Actually, my friend, he's has half Native American. He said, the world is ready for messages about genocide. So please tell your Circassian friends that we're ready to hear it. So get the message out. So I think lots of people in different small nations would be interested in hearing your story.
We have to use this. If somebody is ready to talk about our genocide, maybe we as Circassians, we have to use this. We need somebody who talk about it.
Absolutely. And there's lots of big ideas I have. I don't know if we'll have time for all of them. We might have to talk about them later, but...
You have all the time you want.
This question, I hope I'm not missing some part of the question, but he's thinks he's defending his own land or something. I don't know what he's doing, but the Ukrainians should have their right respected to say I'm Russian or part of Russia or not. Mr. Putin does not get to decide this for them, whatever is in his imagination.
Well, Mr. Agasha is saying here that the NATO and the Security Council are, how can I say, they showed already how silly they are. And the sarcasm of Ukraine, he called it this way. So don't you think that they have to stop promising people to protect or to help while they cannot even protect themselves?
I agree. I mean, he's right. I agree. They should have done something from 20, 25 years ago. but they never. How much did they promise to do something? I'm not so sure. I'd have
Well,
to
no
check.
promises, of course. They did
I'd have to
not. They talked a lot, but they said nothing. You know, like this is what happened.
I remember Biden saying recently, I haven't looked so deeply, but he kept saying, and I was like, okay, they're not going to do anything because, well, we're going to defend NATO's defenses. We'll build up NATO's defenses. Ukraine, well, we're going to clap for them with thoughts and prayers. So will that change? So right now, nobody wants to do anything. They never did.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, Biden said we will never be there. Already he said it. Like, we will never be there. That's it.
Yeah. But will new politicians come in? Will will public pressure mount? Will anything change? I think it's unlikely. But maybe things could change. We don't know the future. Like, we're only using, what is it? The sun rose yesterday, so it will probably rise tomorrow. Inductive reasoning.
Well, this leads us to this question. You think that Circassians should not take any Western promise for their cause? As an example, if we went out to the international organizations like the court, let's say, or the Security Council, or the United Nations, or there, and we got a promise, let's say, from the Western world to protect us, or to defend us, or to support us, do you think that we should not believe this kind of speech or this kind of promises that they give us? We should not depend on the Western world for this?
You should use all possible avenues. You should fight in all possible areas, but the attitude should the maybe not attitude, but the perspective should be a little different. You're not going to them and asking. You're not going to them and pleading your case and asking for justice. Okay, you're going and getting and creating your own justice, but you're using every possible opportunity. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, you have other plans.
Well, the idea I want to get to, like, do you think cooperating with our neighbors, like the guys who are living in our territory, is much better than cooperating with far nations like Western world, as an example? If I have the support from Georgia, from Chechnya, from let's say Estonia, let's say Ukraine, these nations, it's better for me as a Circassian in my cause to go with Western promises. Do you think this is better?
I think that the Western promises are not useful, but you can, I don't want to say force, but you can make people listen to you if you come from a stronger position. So the stronger your position, the more you can get people to cooperate with you, to support you in what you want. And sometimes getting that stronger position means building a wider platform, developing strength through, I think, the cooperation with the neighbors, other Eastern European countries, other peoples with similar problems is a big way to strengthen your platform. So if just I am the not me, but here's a group of Circassian representatives, and you go to the West and you plead your case and you say this and that, and it'd be great if they would do something, right? Maybe they'll do something now because they're worried about Russia. Why not try something? But what are they going to do? What are you going to say? What are they going to do to help you? You need to have a really clear plan, and to get them to listen to you, it's going to be easier if there's you and Chechen and Georgians, and everybody's saying the same thing, and they have something like, why don't you guys do this? And this is what you'll get out of it. And so this has been done in the past. Your ancestors have tried this. It hasn't worked out for various reasons, but we have a completely different world, completely different communications, and like travel possibilities.
interest. Almost everything.
You can learn from mistakes. And so it's possible. I think that's a much stronger way to go about it. But you can also do your individual national thing. The problem with the Caucasian nations, or even the East European nations, is that internally they're divided. So you have Ichkerians and Kadyrovtsi. Okay. So it's hard to find you don't have completely coherent societies, united societies that can all stand together each one is internally divided.
Yeah.
But it will be divided along the lines of more pro-Russian and more patriotic. So you have to find the patriots of all the different groups, and you have to present I don't like counter narrative. You have to present and coordinate and present a real narrative, your perspective. And so people forget about the other perspective. They didn't even hear yours yet.
Well, the idea is like, I'm with you, because if I went to Chechnya, the Kadyrov guys will not even listen to you, not to support you. They will fight you even. But the question is, if the patriots of Caucasus, let's say Circassians, because we are talking about the Circassian cause here, if the patriots of Circassia went now to the Western world and just highlighted their story, we don't want any promises, we don't want anybody to support any kind of physical action that we want to do, like to separate us from Russia or anything. We don't want that. We just want recognition and to highlight our story in the Western world, especially, let's say, America. Do you think ears there will listen to us better than before?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm not an expert on American what they want to hear right now. I haven't lived there in 10 years. But yeah, there's so many people in the United States that believe conspiracy theories. People are very
on the political level, I mean, not just
the political level.
Yeah.
Don't you know more about that than I do? Because haven't your representatives been talking to people on the political level for a long time, for generations?
Yeah.
I mean, haven't you had those connections in Washington and so on? How did it work? I think many Circassians in Jordan have connections to the American military, right?
We do, yes. We not with the military. We had this connection with the Harvard before, and there was the senators who came. They listened, they left. They did not do any kind of any action, actually. Even they did not answer our emails. Like it happened. But now maybe things are different. Maybe they forgot about it. They are people in the end. So if we went now with this kind of situation with Ukraine, and we started our, let's say, propaganda again, do you think they will listen to us?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe, because why not?
But it's a better chance.
It's a better chance because now they're all in a uproar about, but the problem is, like, what are you going to tell them? Like, what are you going to ask them to do? What can they do? I don't know if they will see what they can do for you.
We just want to ask for the recognition of the Circassian genocide.
Okay.
As an example.
I don't really know. But I think my guess here, so you can go to top people and see how they'll react. Top people, leading people, go and see how they react. You might find some people interested, willing, but you might be more willing if that doesn't work, or even if it does work, but you want to put pressure on them. You get the public interested, and then they start complaining to their senators. You get people talking about it throughout the society, and then it kind of bubbles up into the consciousness of these people, and then they'll be a little more receptive to hearing it. But
well, you have to say they have to think how they can use it to their interest. If there is no interest, of course, nobody will support you.
If regular people, we have minorities, we have Native Americans, they'd be interested in hearing some of these things, or they'd be a little more receptive. to a certain extent, but they're so overwhelmed in their own problems too. But they might, well, actually, what I was really thinking about, they talk about force, what is it? The force multiplier. So when you have a certain force, it only goes so far. But you use disinformation and different other tactics to make that force seem to go further.
Understand.
A force multiplier. So if you're weak and you can't punch very hard, you do things to make the surface softer. So when you punch it, it breaks better. It works better. So I'm thinking about voice multiplier, or how. So you Circassian, your group of Circassians, you can go and tell a senator or go and tell someone on the news something. But it's very, even when you have a coordinated message, which I didn't get to talk about yet, but I think you need a very clear
agenda.
Agenda and strategy, but you want to convey the same, all of you want to convey pretty much the same message. At the same time, you can, if you want to keep things decentralized, you could at least know a common thing to say, and you sort of coordinate what you say, when you say, how you say this, and who you say it to at the same time. So you want, but then you want not only your voice coming, you want to multiply that voice. So you have to brainstorm, how can I multiply my voice? How can I multiply my message?
So do you think like America or Europe will be a better environment for what you said now?
Probably the UK and the USA.
Probably more than Europe.
Europe, I mean, I don't feel like Germany is Germany even terribly sympathetic to Ukraine?
No, not that much. She's just related to NATO. Like, this is what's happening.
So, but Europe too, you should try everywhere. But the UK and the US, at least officially, they seem to be pretty upset. Right, so for voice multiplier, what are some ways to do that? You've got your message. You find people who want to say similar messages about themselves, or they want to emphasize their story, and you say, here, you tell your audience. So you audience sharing. You tell
you get support from other nations.
Your audience your story, and then you tell your audience their story too. You're sharing audiences. Things like that. You can be really creative, and you can get these voices out. You can set up forums where, let's say, just Caucasian nations, it could be Caucasian, East European together, Central Asia even, but start with just Caucasians, and you have a list of themes, like Russian aggression, genocide, whatever. This is what we experienced, and everyone can tell a little. You don't have to talk a long time. Everyone gives a piece of information about this for each theme, so that this is countering the disinformation. So a lot of the reason that nobody gets support is because people are believing the Russian story, or it's not in their interest to challenge Putin.
Okay.
So that's a way to fight back as a group and get your voice across as well. What was another idea? Oh, I was reading about just telling. Okay, so if you have disinformation, if you have a narrative, here's narrative A, which is a lie. I'm not going to be very successful if I just come up with narrative B, and I'm just saying, yeah, that he said X and X is a lie, and he said Y and Y is a lie, and he said Z and Z is a lie. It's not going to work because you're just reinforcing that narrative subconsciously. And another thing,
just get to your point without discussing it with Ys, let's say. Like, just say your X's and leave.
No, well, that almost, but yes, there's that, but there's a little different. If people have this narrative planted in their head, so there's narrative, story, and messages, and then your target. So if this narrative is going, I can list all the facts in the world, but they're not going to assimilate those facts.
Understood.
You have to come up with a different narrative which supersedes and goes over that narrative and negates it. This makes it irrelevant. But of course, it should have all the right facts inside it. So when somebody from here comes and says, "But what about?" you can say, "Well, actually, your people already have an answer prepared." Well, actually, so you need to have a very clear, simple narrative that you can broadcast to the world through all your outlets and all your channels. And then you should have stories. This is just an idea. You could have stories to highlight certain parts of this narrative, and then you think about your messages. Who do you want to tell what, and what can you say to make them interested in it? And this is how you can sort of start thinking about how to tailor. So you got, and then you have a list of audiences. You've got Georgian patriots. Okay, what should we tell them? What part of the story should we tell them, or what should we highlight? You have Western leaders who are sympathetic already, right? You have the parts of society that are ready to stand up against Russia, but they're not winning. You can get to them. You have the parts of society who believe the Kremlin propaganda. Well, they need to know something too. You know, you can attack different, not attack, but you can address different kinds of groups, and then you find out other people who want to say similar messages, and you start sharing how to you start sharing each other's messages in certain ways. Yeah, he's right. So you have to stand up for this. You really have to. But it's fighting lies. The main thing is you're fighting lies. Your whole history is fighting lies. Every time you try to do something, there's somebody going, "Well, but that wasn't really a genocide," or, "Well, that wasn't really so bad," or, "Well, you want it to go." Okay, so this is just going on and on. You have to fight back with truth, and truth will eventually win. But you have to outsmart the liar a little bit until his story falls apart. You can't just punch back the same way he punches you. There was some question in English that I missed, but if I have a question, it was about, will Russia let the Circassians be repatriated? I don't know. I can't imagine, but I really don't know anything about this. I'm sorry.
Well, the idea is, like, do you think, as a specialist of our area, do you think with the history and the things that we have now, if Circassians start movements outside of their homeland, let's say in UK, in USA, in Europe, in Middle East, this will affect Circassians who are living already under the occupation of Russia?
Are you asking me if I think it will?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. It could. It could. But if you think about Chechens, they have some, people are still talking in emigration about the Aslan Maskhadov. No, not Aslan. Anzor Maskhadov has a channel, and he is constantly exposing. The Chechens are not that influential, but at least they're trying to tell their side of the story and stand up for their side and tell the truth as they see it about things. And
but Chechens, they have Kadyrov there, that he can fix anything without even Russia hear about it. Believe me, he can immediately leave. But we don't have Kadyrov in Circassia. So my question is, as an example, Orhan is in USA, in Canada, in wherever, and he went out and he said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Orhan is an organization; he's not a person. And he said 1, 2, 3, 4, and he's asking for the support for his cause, blah blah. Will Russia be physically threat on the Circassian people who are living under the occupation of Russia? Like, they are occupying us now. So
aren't you already under physical threat?
We are. But the idea is, like, if we did something outside, do you think things will be worse than now? For the people who are living in the homeland, like living in Circassia, and Russia is there, their forces are there, and people outside, they started moving. So this will affect the people inside our homeland, as you think?
I don't know, because you know this situation better than me, because I'm mostly a historian. So I know more about what happened 100 years ago than what's happening now. But so you must make this moral decision yourself. If I do this, and you can also do tests. You can try something and see what happens. You don't have to go completely, 0 to 100.
Explosion.
You can check, and you can do things, but also you can inform the people on the inside to pretend they're very loyal. So I'm very loyal.
So do you think somehow, somewhere in your mind, even far away, that Russia can use Circassians as hostages that they have now?
I wouldn't put anything past them.
So they can.
This guy, he is a psychopath or something worse. And if there is anything worse, I don't know. Yesterday I was praying, like not literally, but I mean figuratively, I was praying like, oh, at least maybe they will not commit such horrible human rights violations on the Ukrainians. They're calling them brothers, right? Like they did in Chechnya or somewhere else. But that's wishful thinking. They already are. I mean, they don't care.
But Russia, a little bit, they care about their reputation, like they do. A little bit. They go like, no, we are not the savages. No, come see how we are giving them food. Like the Ukrainians who went to Russia, they are eating better than me now. So the idea is like, look, we are nice. Look, we do this. Look, we do that. Somehow, somewhere, they care about their reputation. They do. And we are just going against the authorities. We are not going through civilians at all. We are not touching any kids or women, or they don't do that. This is what they are saying. And they don't want to make Europe feel that they are trying to make World War III or that they are a threat to Europe. They are trying to do that, but they are not succeeding, of course, but they are trying. So the idea...
Go ahead.
If we used this thing on Russia, like they are trying to keep their reputation clean, or they want to save this reputation that they don't have. But anyway, do you think even with this, they can use Circassians who are in Circassia as hostages if somebody outside did something?
Well, if they're doing like this to Ukraine, where everyone can see, however prettily they're trying to present their petticoats. What do you think about Circassians? Nobody knows about. It's very hard to get information from there, isn't it? I mean, to me,
it is very hard. You cannot even send a video from there.
I don't know really what's going. Me as an American has no idea what's happening in there. I might be able to get some information from Chechnya or Dagestan or Ingushetia, but it's very hard to know
from Circassia.
So if something were happening, then who would know?
Well, do you think do you think that people knows that it's easier in Chechnya and Dagestan and everywhere more than having anything from Circassia? Like,
no.
Don't you see that people, I cannot get information of what's happening in Circassia, but easily I can do this from Chechnya, from Dagestan, from Ossetia, from Abkhazia. But Circassia is under this black umbrella, that closes it. And this dome or this umbrella is not there for nothing. Like Russians are doing this. They don't let you know anything happening inside Circassia because of something. And the problem is like nobody is seeing this black dome there, like they don't see it. So they don't, and they are not interested of it,
No, so if something did happen, you would be finding out,
Exactly. So if Russia went through ethnically, went through Circassians and started to harm them in any way, physical, political, economical, it doesn't matter. They tried to harm them. I think people will know about it. They are Russian citizens in the end. So why Russia are attacking their own citizens, doing a genocide? Don't you think Russia will think about this?
No.
They will not.
I don't see any real morality there.
I understand you. Well, we don't see to like we do.
I mean, they might be able to put up a Potemkin village. They see, they might care about. No, that's not true. But I mean, sure, but it doesn't stop them, does it?
So we cannot trust Western, and we cannot trust Russians.
So your point is, if I understand, like if we do something, if we start being loud, if we start amplifying our voice for some reason, to make a point, then Russia will possibly retaliate to make us shut up by harming our countrymen inside Russia.
Exactly.
And nobody.
And I cannot trust the West in the same time. So I cannot trust the bear who wants to eat me, and I cannot trust the hunter who is doing nothing.
Because if you think about it, then even if it was known what Russia was doing, is the West mobilizing to save Ukraine? So why did it mobilize to save Chechnya? So some human rights abuses and some economic pressure. You think they're going to mobilize for that? So even
they will do nothing.
Even if you did know, and especially when people start to get worried and say, "Hey, we're very worried about these widespread human rights abuses," and Russia just says, "Oh no, that's not true." Like you were talking about, no, we do these nice things. Everybody's happy, and so they're like, "Okay, well, everything's fine because now I don't have to deal with it, right? Now I can continue." Now, did it change with Ukraine at this moment? Did it change? Did people now suddenly start getting a different perspective? Yeah, I think people started to get a little bit different perspective. They started to open their eyes a little bit, but I don't know if they're going to do anything about it. We have to watch and see. But you can organize, you can start getting your message across, and you can start pushing them to do something about it. And if you do this collectively, you might be able to push them more than if you sit and wait. And then if they still don't do anything, at least you're getting experience, you're moving forward, you're growing, you're not being passive. Maybe you can accomplish something, make some progress, some gains.
So we can highlight our story, but we cannot take any actions for this moment. Like we can use this just to highlight our story, but not to ask for anything. So things will be a little bit, how can I say, safe.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. But right now you want to really push back on the Russian narrative, I think. Because if you say, hey, we're Circassians and we've had terrible tragedies and lots of injustice and we would like our international rights respected, that's great. That's fine. But what can anyone do about it at the moment? They're not helping anyone with anyone's international legal rights. And so I don't know if that's the best strategy, because you've been talking about that for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Maybe be creative and come with a different angle and start finding a way to put pressure on them to actually do stuff.
Actually, with my own eyes, I saw how Russians are respecting the human rights and the freedom of speech. I was there for 2 years, so I exactly know what they are doing. So the idea is, as you and I recommended, we can just highlight without taking any other actions for now.
Yeah, and
so we can use, and don't get me wrong with the word use, we can use the Ukrainian situation as a higher step to let people know about the Circassian cause and the Circassian history and our story.
Absolutely.
But not go through any demands like we want this, we want that. No, we will not go there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But in that process, you can eventually find out what you might want people to do and what you can do. and it might become interesting for everyone at some point to find cooperation. But you should work out in advance what you want and see when that might be. If the time ever arises where people can do things for you, you're ready.
I understand. Well, my lady, we are almost out of time. You and me, we had 55 minutes of a very, very interesting conversation. I really got a lot that I wrote, like really, and we will talk about these things even more and more. For now, just I want you to give us the final message that you want to tell us, according to your knowledge, according to your analyzation for the current situation. So just tell us, as an American specialist of our situation, what do you think the better thing that we can do here and we can do outside for our cause as Caucasians, at this point, and consider it our finishing message for our episode?
You must come together. You must coordinate, and you must unite. At least a united message to start.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find, you have to hunt, you have to try very hard to find common language and come together, no matter what. This is the historical story of the Caucasus nations. They are this pattern of being Caucasian, but also being separate, and when you're separate, getting conquered, and when you're together, accomplishing something, but never quite being able to do it, since ancient times, never quite being able to unite and keeping on getting conquered.
Yeah, we like fighting,
It is the essential tragedy of this wonderful place and these wonderful peoples. So let's learn from the patterns of the past and apply them to the present and become stronger than ever. And then once you are stronger than ever, you don't have to care about what the West will do. You will tell them what they will do.
I understand. Well, thank you very much for your time. That was very interesting. And actually, you gave me a lot of ideas that we will talk about in the future.
I hope so. I only said maybe 3 ideas.
No, thank you. Thank you, really.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all and meet you all.
Thank you. Really.
I had a great honor to be here with you. Thank you.
The honor is for us. Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too.
Если где-то в кругу молодых держит речь седовласый ядык, ты не вздумай его